It's almost halfway through 2022 and there have been some really awesome whiskies released in the last year or so. Unfortunately, also in the last year or so, loads more people have gotten into collecting whiskey, which means for us collectors, it's that bit harder for us to find all those bottles we really want. So, in this video, let me show you 5 bottles I think you should be hunting this year. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Matt, I'm a whiskey nerd, and like I said, I'm going to show you 5 bottles I think you should be hunting this year. And first up, it's the Bourbon from Barrel. This is a really interesting bottle. I haven't actually yet filmed my review of it, but I already know it's a bottle I will definitely want to find another bottle of. I actually picked up a bottle of the Barrel Bourbon and of the Barrel Seagrass Rye at the same time, and honest to God, I prefer the Barrel Bourbon. I mean, it was aged in rum, in port, and Cabernet wine barrels, and it just got so much more flavor. It's so juicy, so rich. It's really great and really promising for what else they can deliver. It's got all those classic bourbon notes you would expect from a really good quality bourbon, but it's been backed up by so much more juicy, round richness. There's a good brown sugar note, there's a nice kind of red berry note coming through, there's a nice bit of deep, dark, kind of almost like a cocoa powder dryness, and it's all backed up with cask strength, coming in at over 60%. I think it's actually 62.35%, so it's a very nice bourbon. And if you see a bottle of this, you absolutely should pick it up, otherwise you're going to miss out on something really great. Next up, it's an Irish whiskey, Blue Spot. Now, if you've ever heard of Green Spot, you'll be kind of familiar with what this is. This is Blue Spot. It's not entirely a new whiskey, but it was released in stages. So it was released in a small batch in Ireland and in bigger batches in the US. So it might not yet be readily available in your area, and it's definitely one you should be hunting down. If you're familiar with Green Spot, you'll know that kind of nice, rich, appley, orchard fruit, spicy note you get, backed up with some black pepper and some really rich vanilla and caramel. This takes that and amps it up to 11 because it is a cask strength version of Blue Spot with some extra maturation. So this was aged in bourbon barrels, in sherry butts and Madeira wine casks, so it gets those classic kind of Green Spot notes and then adds on some tropical fruits, some lime, some kiwi, some really nice fresh flavors. If you can get this at the recommended retail price, which is about €80, probably about $80, maybe plus tax, it is a very good bottle to get. Now, when supplies were limited of this, I was seeing bottles on the secondary market go for upwards of €250. That's 3 times the price. That lets you know just how good this whiskey is and how desperate people were to get it. So if you see a bottle of this on the shelf, I should definitely recommend you get it. If you like Irish whiskies, even if you're just a kind of a passing fan of Irish whiskies, but you wish they went higher than 40%, you wish they had more weight behind them, Blue Spot is definitely one you should be looking out for. Next, we're keeping it Irish and sticking with that theme of taking a good Irish whiskey and adding some extra proof. This is the Jameson Black Barrel Proof. Now, I think this might have originally only been released in the Irish market, but I have seen some other whiskey tubers in America, in Australia even, having the Black Barrel Proof, so it might be starting to become available in your area, and if it is, you should definitely hunt this one down. If you've tried Jameson Black Barrel, you know it's a good whiskey. It's got some nice caramel, bit of sherry notes, some nice char notes, kind of almost between an Irish whiskey and a bourbon, but it does only come in at 40% ABV. This comes in at 50% ABV, delivering a lot more flavor. That extra ABV just allows the whiskey to deliver a much more rounded and comprehensive palate, instead of just being defined by a simple, smooth kind of caramel, vanilla, bit of berry note. You also get that spice, you get a touch of the oak coming through, you get a bit of the char, you just get a lot more weight and a lot more oomph coming through. This, despite being 50% ABV, despite having that higher proof, I think this is also very beginner friendly. Jameson is a whiskey brand that's going to be familiar to a load of people. I mean, it's a very popular brand, a very famous brand, and if you've got someone who's maybe used to whiskey, maybe they're a newbie, maybe they're getting into whiskey, they'll definitely be familiar with Jameson. So this is something you could take off your shelf and show off with, because it's got a really cool bottle, yes. It's also that really kind of classic Jameson mouthfeel, the bit of sherry note, the grain coming through, and they might have seen the Jameson Black Barrel, but this will be the Jameson Black Barrel Proof, so it'll be familiar but a new experience and something definitely worth showing off. Next we're going to the land down under Next we're going to the land down under, to Australia, for a market that I think is untapped at present. So this is the Starward Left Field, coming from the Starward distillery, and I honestly think Australian whiskey is probably going to be the next frontier of whiskey. So much like Japanese whiskey was a few years ago, relatively unknown but putting out some really good stuff, I think Australia is next on the line because they are putting out some really nice whiskies, but they aren't really getting that international distribution that really they deserve. Starward seem to be combining kind of the best aspects of a few different styles of whiskey. So they're using single malt whiskey, but they're not really using peated single malt whiskey, so there's no smoke. Just letting that maltiness come through. They're also not focusing on virgin oak barrels or on sherry barrels. They're using wine casks because Australia is of course well known for their wine production. So they're really kind of using the local environment, they're using the wine producers in the area and really bringing together a good harmony of what they've got available in Australia. And the Left Field is, for me, one of the best whiskies coming out of Starward. Like, I've tried the Nova from them, I've tried a few of the others as samples, but I honestly think the Left Field is the better of their whiskies that I've tried. It's almost like it's malty and fruity in equal measure. So yeah, you got that funkiness, you got that caramel, you got that kind of almost biscuity note from the maltiness, but then you've also got that rich red fruits, the sweetness that comes through from the wine casks. You've got a nice bit of oak char, a bit of deep oak flavour coming through because again, they do use French oak barrels as well as Australian oak barrels, so you get this nice rich oakiness to the whiskey that just kind of on the palate delivers something you might almost expect from an American single malt, but definitely with a new twist on it. Now, if you're watching this video from Australia, you're probably not going to need to hunt for Starward Left Field. You're probably going to find them everywhere. But for those of us who don't live in the land of Oz, Australian expressions are quite thin on the ground, quite hard to find, and you sometimes have to go to specialist bottle shops to even be able to get one or two Australian whiskies, never mind the wide range you'll be able to get in Australia and the wide range that I think should be explored. So if you're the kind of person who likes exploring, likes expanding their palate, likes trying new things, but you've had a bunch of bourbons, you've had a bunch of scotches, you've had a bunch of Irish, you've even had a bunch of Japanese, I think Australian whiskey is something you should try out, you should explore, because like I said, I think there's a lot of untapped potential down there and you should hunt their bottles while you can. And lastly, we're going to close off with an example whiskey. So this is the Koval Rye, which is finished in peach brandy casks, and unless you go to the Koval distillery in Chicago, you're not going to be able to get this whiskey. So why am I mentioning it? Well, I'm using this as an example. So when I was in Chicago, I went to the Koval distillery and I tried a bunch of their whiskeys. I tried the rye and I thought it was fine, it was nice, there wasn't anything special about it, there wasn't anything to write home about, but then I tried this special distillery exclusive rye and it blew my mind. It was so nice, it was so rich and round. They had it with an old fashioned cocktail and it was really good, so I immediately knew I had to buy a bottle of it. It takes that classic rye spiciness, herbal, almost botanical notes you'd expect, but then melds it out with some nice rich like peach cobbler style. It's really nice. It's got this spiciness, this graininess, and that peach flavor. You'd almost expect it to be kind of like a peach cobbler. It's really nice and really unique. And this is a good example of what you can find when you go off the beaten track, when you stop exploring the big brands. If you're traveling and if you decide to go somewhere new, even if you're in a local area and there's a local distillery, try out the local stuff. Go to the distillery, see what exclusives they got, and see what kind of special editions they've got, because you'll be able to often find some really nice whiskies that you wouldn't be able to find anywhere else, and they can really show off something new and something exciting. And that's kind of the point of hunting whiskies. I mean, when you're hunting whiskies, you're not really hunting it just to have it. You're hunting it to show it off, to share it with friends, and to kind of explore new things together. So if you go to one side of the country, your friend goes to some other part of the country, and you both come back and you bring back something special, something that you could only get in that part of the country, it's going to be a much better tasting than if you both just get something you could get anywhere. So when you go to a new part of the country or a new part of the world, don't just hunt for those familiar brands, hunt for something new, hunt for something exciting, and hunt for something unique. So there you have it. 5 bottles I think you should make sure to hunt down before the end of the year, because they're all going to give you something new, something exciting, something different, or something familiar but with a new spin on it. Maybe you've got 5 different whiskies you think you should be hunting before the end of the year. Make sure to let me know in the comments below, because like I said, whiskey's all about sharing, whiskey's all about enjoying. So I'm going to make sure I enjoy these whiskies while I have them, and I will see you next time. Sláinte.